Pokemon Legends ZA is almost downright offensive, and it proves that Nintendo thinks that we're dumb and we deserve nothing because we will lap up any slop that they will serve. And they're right, because the game has sold over 6 million copies in its first week. This game that looks like it's a PS2 game and that has innovations that people are praising in the game as if they were revolutionary, and I guess they are because they're for Pokemon, that are basically dumbed down systems from other games, including games Nintendo themselves have made before. And thanks to leaks, we know that they are just putting in the bare minimum, that they do not care what happens because since it has the Pokemon name on it, it will print money. The alleged budget for Pokemon Legends ZA is around $13 million. Some other leaks I've seen claim as high as $20 million. But stop and think about it. How is that the budget for the latest game in the series with most fans technically in the world, with the highest valued IP on the planet? To put that into a different context, the game needed to sell 200,000 copies in order to break even. But no, it's Pokemon. It sold 6 million. And that's the thing, isn't it? You can put Pokemon on pretty much anything and you can guarantee a profit, but if on top of that you can make the budget as low as possible, minimum effort, minimum development time, skeleton crew working on the game, put it out and have it be the talk of the town and the biggest success just because it's Pokemon, well, I guess you do that, because why would we deserve better? If only it stopped there. Some of those leaks are already talking about the DLC that they announced for the game before the game came out. DLC that looks to include over 150 Pokemon and about 40 to 50 added Mega Evolutions, including a ton of never-before-seen new ones, as well as ridiculous numbers I've seen oscillating out there for the number of side missions and story missions included in that $30 DLC that, given that it was announced well before launch, and given that the DLC contains so much, to put it into perspective, the base game has around 230 Pokemon and the DLC will have 150 new ones added. I mean, how does this not scream cut content? And do you know what's even worse? There's tons of people, friends of mine, straight up saying that, well, the bones of ZA are pretty decent, so they think that with the DLC, it'll turn out to be a great game. So I'm sorry, let me get this straight. Not only are people okay that we've reached the point that we buy unfinished games willingly and we expect them to be unfinished, but we are thankful that we're buying an unfinished game and looking forward to spending $30 more for a final price of $90 in order to hopefully get a finished and good game? And still, people say that Legends ZA is great because of those things that it does for Pokemon. How we've reached this state of conformity, how we are willing to accept garbage, I don't know, man. But I think that we as customers and Pokemon fans, Pokemon as an IP, considering how valuable it is, deserves better. But fine, how bad is it, and like how greedy is all of it? Well, I'm gonna talk you through the good of the game, the bad of the game, and the downright atrocious, and why I find what Nintendo is doing just straight up offensive. Before we do that though, hi, I'm Mug, and if you're new here, welcome, and if you're not new here, welcome back. It's great to see you. You're looking fantastic. You probably know the drill here on YouTube at this point. Hit the like button if you enjoy the video. It really does help, especially like we're competing against AI generated anything at this point. And if you like the way that I cover video games, consider subscribing. Don't do it yet. Do it towards the end of the video once you're convinced, but keep that in the back of your mind. Let's get into it. If those numbers about the budget of Pokemon Legends ZA didn't scare you, they really should. You see, the creature collecting genre is incredibly popular and successful and has demonstrated to be so over a very long period of time. This isn't a 90s fad or a 2000s fad. This might be a fad for forever. This is just an incredibly popular genre, and we keep seeing it time and time again. The continued success of Pokemon throughout the years proves it as much, but I do want to point out Palworld. Palworld sold over 8 million copies in 6 days, meaning that it technically outperformed Pokemon Legends ZA, by the way. But as of about a month ago, it's passed over 25 million in sales. And while I don't agree with a lot of people that Palworld is just some crappy Pokemon knockoff, in my opinion, it does some really interesting things with the concept of creature collecting by making you do more with your creatures than just turn-based battles. But even if you want to consider it a Pokemon knockoff, damn, is that a successful Pokemon knockoff? When knockoffs are this successful, the real deal must be worth gold. And it is. Pokemon is currently considered the most valuable intellectual property in the world because it prints money not just on the video games that are used to introduce new regions and new Pokemon and all that, but through everything else. From merchandising to collaborations to the trading card game to, of course, the video game. And when you have a money printer, you want it all for yourself. You don't want anybody else to try and compete with it. Be they the surprisingly very, very successful Digimon game that came out this year, Pal World, or anything else that could threaten it. Which is why Nintendo has been so litigious with everything regarding Pokemon. This is why they are currently on their patenting spree and with their lawsuit against Pal World for patent infringement on mechanics, game mechanics that make no sense. You can watch some other videos I've done diving deep into the legalities of that, but they're doing everything they can to protect their golden goose, except actually put effort into making their games good. And this is really important. If they're the only ones who can make Pokemon style games, they don't have to make them good. They don't have to evolve. They don't have to do anything. They can just put Pokemon on the box of anything and somehow sell it. If you thought people lost their minds with things like Nintendo and the value of its things just for being Nintendo, the goddamn alarm clock, that's nothing compared to Pokemon. And because it's clear that this is their strategy, they've done it again. A tiny budget for the second entry in the Legends series, which, by the way, I'm on the record multiple times saying that Pokemon Legends Arceus is my favorite Pokemon game, and I think that still stands. But Pokemon game, as we're about to see, is a really big qualifier. But the point I'm reaching here is that all of this strategy of keeping Pokemon in its own bubble, of limiting the competition that is possible in the world of creature collecting, it's all because it is a functional strategy to keep the expectations of people incredibly low and still somehow disappoint. This is basically the closest you can get to Stockholm Syndrome in gaming, and I think Pokemon ZA is the best example for it. So I've been playing quite a lot of the game, and the phenomenon that I'm going to describe is something that I have suffered as well. You're playing through it and you get used to the way that it looks and the things that it does and the terrible pacing and the way that it does things, and you start looking for the positives and suddenly you're having a good time. You're like, oh, this is fun. Look at the Pokemon. There's Pokemon there. And it's only until you stop to think about it for just like 5 seconds that you realize what you're playing and what you were thinking of praising. Which, don't get me wrong, you can have fun with things that don't deserve praise. You can have as much fun as you want in life. I really don't think that you should ever play a video game looking to not have fun. But god damn it, do we give it passes and even allow people to praise this series for things that would never fly anywhere else? The big additions to Pokemon Legends ZA is the fact that it has a interconnected open world within Lumio City, playing like the previous Legends game where you get to run around with your character, interact with things, and mostly throw Pokeballs and catch a ton of different Pokemon. Its biggest innovation is its action combat system that is real time and where positioning actually matters. You can dodge attacks, enemies can dodge yours, and all of your different abilities are on cooldown, so you can rotate through them very quickly, keeping the overall pacing of combat much higher and, in my opinion, very fun. Much more fun than the standard turn-based approach. However, as evidenced by the developers that worked on this game and its shoestring budget, at least shoestring for Pokemon, this is just Xenoblade Chronicles. This is just Monolith Soft, just as they did with Arceus, injecting a bit of their absolute genius and their expertise in order to make a unique combat system, but in this case, an incredibly dumbed down version of the things that you can find in, for example, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, or even the recently re-released Xenoblade Chronicles X. Is the combat system in ZA good then? Yes, especially when compared to the same old turn-based combat from before. It is considerably better than that. But is it good compared to Xenoblade Chronicles 3? No, it's garbage. It's very bad. It's boring and limited. And it's only held up by the charm of the Pokemon and the world that it's in. And because in this franchise, we are used to getting nothing, so when we get something, we're supposed to clap? That interconnected open world of Lumiose? It looks the way it looks, man. This footage is from Switch 2. Thankfully, because it's on Switch 2, you get to witness it at a higher resolution and at a smooth 60 frames per second. Because if you were playing on the OG Switch, you couldn't see it that way. You'd have to endure this way more blurry and at a wonderful 30 frames per second. That's just because the Switch is old. Sure, let me say this again. This year, in March, Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition came out on the Nintendo Switch, and it looks like this. What? What do you mean? How is this a first-party Nintendo game in their best-selling, most valuable IP? Oh, well, it's because Nintendo isn't in charge of doing it. It's a collaboration between Nintendo and some of their studios, including, as I just mentioned, Monolith Soft and Gamefreak, because Gamefreak are the ones that are just coasting by and have never done anything decent with their lives beyond creating Pokemon. Well, sure, that's why they announced Beast of Reincarnation, a new Gamefreak game that looks like this. Sure, these are the reasons that we get boxy streets with flat textures, no windows, and the windows that there are repeating throughout everything. This is why the geometry of what are supposed to be parks look like they were taken straight out of a PlayStation 2 game. This is why we somehow have cutscenes where everybody's mouths are flapping and everybody's moving around and doing stuff, but there's no actual voices, so you just have to imagine, making it look honestly quite ridiculous. Sure, there's some cool stuff here. They're expanding on systems that were there before with Legends Arceus. You could easily praise them for the fact that in the battle zones, you get to stealth around and collect little bonus missions that you have to accomplish by battling a bunch of trainers in a row and getting bonus points for that. But then at the same time, that is kind of the bare minimum of something interesting that you could do with an RPG combat system, is add little mini games on top of it to keep people entertained by trying to use different Pokemon, because there is no actual depth to a lot of the system otherwise. You can also say that it's interesting that you can go to the different wild zones and battle the alpha Pokemon that return from Arceus, and that it's interesting how now you can fight like 7 different Pokemon at once, and AoE attacks matter, and you can place giant fields on the battlefield, and it's all very dynamic. But at the same time, that isn't anything special compared to pretty much any other RPG. This isn't the first time you get to fight a lot of different enemies in one area in an RPG. This is just the first time you get to do it in Pokemon. Oh wow, AoE attacks now actually serve a purpose beyond team battles. Welcome to the 21st century, I guess. A lot of that is interesting, the potential to keep combats and your buffs going by just taking on all of the Pokemon in a wild zone at the same time. There's some curious stuff here, and when it comes to the world design, specifically some of the little puzzles that exist in moving throughout the zones, or some of the more Metroidvania-like elements of having different Pokemon to use different things in the terrain and advance through it, are not first-time game designer type of stuff. There's undeniably some clever level design and some interesting use of the things available, even if they have, pretty much none of it. And to be honest, despite the pacing of the game, especially at the start being just the worst. One of the worst, and I know Pokemon isn't praised for having good pacing, especially at the start of the games, but this one is rough, man. Once things get going, it's functional for a Pokemon game. Instead of the boss battles that we had in Legends Arceus, we now have the Mega Evolution battles that take place against rogue Mega Evolved Pokemon, where you get transported to a magical arena and you fight normally with a partner, what is essentially a raid boss, even down to some of the raid mechanics. Very light ones, very appropriate ones for anybody of any age to understand, but still something slightly new. The Pokemon have big attacks, and a lot of the time they're focusing you, the trainer, not your Pokemon, and you have to dodge out of the way and use your Pokemon effectively to progress through the raid mechanics and power up. And that can be fun, if reminiscent a bit of Pal World. Look at that, huh? So once again, this mechanic, these battles can be very fun, even though they are the least Pokemon-like thing in the whole game. but they're really good for a Pokemon game. They're not really good for games in general. The one thing that I can't just directly praise without that very qualifying statement is that I like the writing here. I think it's very self-aware and oftentimes funny, as in honestly pretty funny in a way that you wouldn't expect on like such a big media property. It shoots its shot with some of its jokes is what I'm saying, and whether they land or not is a different thing than admiring the fact that they did put that charm and personality into it, which, hey, I like some of the writing in this game. That's what I can say that's just purely good. And then pretty much everything else is bad. That and the things that they have directly stolen from the Xenoblade series and Monolith Soft's efforts. So like the way that it keeps moving throughout the city, engaging, there's never really a moment of just holding the stick forward to traverse the city. There's always something that you can kind of go out of your way and collect. And that's just very much Xenoblade level design. But again, I'd rather just play Xenoblade. If I were interested in having good game mechanics to follow and enjoy, that's there. So then what's downright bad? And pretty much everything else, but only in context. The menus, the ability to switch out your moves, how quickly you can give Pokemon different held items, all of these things, they've been streamlined and they're better and there's quality of life in them that should have been there about 15 years ago. Except that since they're here now and Pokemon wants to exist in its own bubble where it can only be compared to itself, we're supposed to say, wow, what an evolution. Lumio City, sure, it's interesting to explore, but you can tell from just watching my gameplay that the visual diversity that is here and the way that it contextualizes the Pokemon is not particularly interesting. There are some very standout features, things like the sewers I think are really cool because it's like an actual dungeon in a Pokemon game that's quite interesting, but most of what's going on here is not very visually appealing, and by not very, I mean oftentimes looks incredibly ugly, and that's on the Switch 2, which is a very expensive new piece of hardware. Its gameplay is an evolution for the series, not for video game. It's an evolution for what you would expect from Pokemon, but that shouldn't be what we expect, and we shouldn't expect games on shoestring budgets that look this way. We should expect things that are grander in scale, that have bigger changes, and that are even, they call me crazy, at the forefront of evolution of the creature collecting genre, that are actually making strides into giving people what they want. But before we talk about what people want, let me reiterate the downright atrocious. The fact that this game is $60 on Switch 2 and it feels like there is cut content here that has been jammed into its $30 DLC expansion that you can buy February of next year. Man, what a short development time on that. Definitely nothing suspicious there. In order to get something that is only innovative by the metric of Pokemon and that feels as shoestring as it does at times, that's not good. That's not a good value proposal. You have to go for it and it'll sell gangbusters if you like Pokemon, because there's nothing else that you can do if you like Pokemon except play the Pokemon game. I just find it incredibly offensive that this is what they choose to make. This is the budget they choose to allocate, and they think this is okay to represent the largest intellectual property in the world. And their strategy of making people say thank you for the tiniest new innovation works. To me, that sort of behavior, and now the example of greed with the contents that are in this game versus what is coming out in its DLC, it just proves that they're milking Pokemon for every cent that it's worth without actually giving a damn on making the series better. And to me, that is highly disrespectful to Pokemon and to customers. They're basically trying to train their fans into expecting the worst, and they have. I just demonstrated it in this very video. I don't know if you noticed that I said that the sewers in the game are interesting because they feel like a traditional RPG dungeon. Something that you explore and you solve some puzzles in different rooms, you have different combat encounters that are unique and different, and then you reach the end and get some rewards, get some loot, or progress the story. And I praised it because in my head I kept imagining, man, what if this sort of thing were implemented in the mainline Pokemon series, and instead of just exploring sewers, we got a bunch of different locations and interesting things to do. Imagine this same setup but the Lavender Town Tower. And now we're talking about some Demon King's Labyrinth level stuff, and that would be so cool to see in the game. And then I stop and remember that I've played things like Romancing Saga Revenge of the Seven. I've played the Octopath Travelers of the world. I've played Metaphor ReFantasio. If you want to go even way back, I've played Dragon Quest 11, and those games all do what I'm asking Pokemon to do, and they do it at a degree that I'm pretty sure Pokemon won't reach until maybe 2035. And they perfectly know what their fans actually want. So look, let me get something important out of the way. People are going to say that they don't give them big budgets because they still sell. And that's correct. They don't give them big budgets because why do that when you can maximize the profit margin? Sure, if you put in a big budget and make the best Pokemon game ever, it'll probably sell a lot more, but then you're setting up expectations for the future, and who wants to do that? But I know that some other people are going to say that the reason that they don't do more with Pokemon is because they don't want to toy around with a formula that works, and that potentially they could break that formula. I think that is incredibly stupid because the Pokemon company, Gamefreak, Nintendo, they know exactly what people want because they're the ones who told us what we want. And they have plenty of examples of other games, including stuff like Pal World, showing them that people want it. People want to explore the world of Pokemon. They want to spend time with their creatures. They want to use their creatures for something beyond battling. They want to build their cozy homes and decorate and go out there and catch legendary Pokemon and really get invested into each of them and have them do unique things with the environment or work at your home base or whatever it is. People want the Ash Ketchum adventure. They want to actually go out there and live in a world of Pokemon. It's what they showed us, and they have in all of the media surrounding Pokemon for years and years and years, and they don't give that to us. And when something else like Pal World comes along and shows us a glimpse of that, they go and sue them as hard as they can. If they know what we want and every time they take a little baby step forward, everybody claps, why can't they just take a normal sized step forward? And sure, it's because they don't want to set expectations and they'd rather everybody absolutely hate everything that's going on with Pokemon. I get it, but it's still sad. Recent leaks indicate that there is a new Pokemon project on the way that is supposed to take place across 4 entire regions of the Pokemon world, and somehow they are aiming for it to actually look good. I'm not going to put up the image that's quite ridiculous of, what they're aiming for versus what they have in-house at the moment, because that was leaked, and I'm not doing it on the off chance that because of that tiny thing, this video gets taken down. But it doesn't look great, but at least it's an inkling that they're trying to do what they've been selling us forever. If there's one more positive thing that I can say about Pokemon Legends EA is that I think that what they've achieved on this budget is quite impressive. Again, for the budget and for a Pokemon game. But the customer isn't supposed to care about the budget of the game. They're supposed to care about the game they're playing because there's a ton of other games for $60 or $70 or $80 or $20 or $30 with gigantic differences in their budgets. And all you know is what you pay and what you get. And I think that what you pay and what you get for Pokemon Legends EA is just not acceptable anymore. It's Nintendo, so the game will probably never go down in price and it'll only go up thanks to the DLC if you want to have the full experience of it. And as a person who thought Legends Arceus was a great time, and I don't play games to be miserable, I haven't had a terrible time playing Legends EA for this review, I still think that it's not worth it because it's just offensive what they're doing with this and what they're offering us. I think that it's good for a Pokemon game. If it weren't for the fact that it's a Pokemon game, it'd be pretty bad by every metric. So go play Xenoblade Chronicles X. Go play any of the other thousands of great games or any of the hundreds of great games that came out this year. But don't give your money and your time to Pokemon unless they actually try one of these days. That's what I have to say. In the meantime, I've been Mug. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that what I said made sense, and I don't know, hopefully some people will recognize just how crazy this situation is. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, and if you didn't, subscribe for more on news, reviews, essays on the industry and video games in general. All sorts of stuff here on the channel, all filtered through my way of viewing things, which hopefully is enjoyable and entertaining. For now, thank you so much for watching, especially here at the end of the video. It's incredibly appreciated. And I also appreciate the people on the wall who directly support the channel either on Patreon or here as members on YouTube. You go the extra mile in supporting me, and I am incredibly grateful for that. Thank you. I've been Mug, as always. Enjoy some great video games, maybe not Pokemon Legends EA, and I'll see you again very soon.